Welcome to Shorty's SuperCoach, and the footy is back. NAB Challenge Week 1 has been and gone, so it's time to ask the question, what did we learn from a SuperCoach perspective from the weekend's games? As I've touched on in other videos, I don't rate NAB Challenge events overly highly. I think some are relevant, but often it can be littered with false hope and players getting extra game time because other guys are out, etc., and it can miscue some of the stats and things like that. I don't really look at the SuperCoach points too much. I mean, have a glance, but you know, it can be a bit changed up with all the different game times and players being played in different positions, so I much prefer to have a look at some of the contested ball stats, clearances, watch the replay, where they're lining up at centre bounces or if it's off a halfback flank, etc. Have a bit of a closer look, not just looking at the final results of the SuperCoach standings. But we did learn a few things, that's for sure. And it is early days because the weekend was mixed with some teams really wanting to have a crack, really find some form and confidence, and other teams that were just not setting themselves to play too good a footy, to be honest, just trying some young players. Quite a few clubs left some of their gun players at home, and we'll see a better outfit from them in some of their other matches throughout the NAB Challenge. But first off, Hawthorn and Carlton kicked us off, and I'm just going to run through the players that caught my eye from a SuperCoach perspective, because that's what it's all about, and we want to find out which guys maybe convinced you a little bit more, or maybe you should be a little bit concerned. And just a few players that people have been talking about as well. So Sam Kerridge was the obvious one. Probably for the whole weekend, he was the real winner. 137k in the forward line in the midfield. A lot of people have been talking, is he just a reject tagger from the Crows? Where will he play? I know there are a few players out. Don't think Mark Murphy played and things like that. No Cripps from memory. But he had 28 touches, 17 contested, 8 tackles, 6 clearances. He's in and under finding the pill. And yes, he may not get that amount of opportunities as much as he did last Friday there, or Thursday, sorry. But there's no doubt, I think even with a few players coming back, he will still play that in and under role. It sort of suggests how well he played, that he's no tagger, he's no forward, he's going to be played through the middle, ball-winning player, and he did it so well. So absolutely lock him in at this point in time. Hopefully he can continue that form, but the signs are very good early. Fremantle and Richmond, of course, by the way, Hawthorn, it was a walk in the park for them. I know it was a reasonable side on paper, but they're just chilling for the moment. They'll get going when season really starts. Fremantle and Richmond, Michael Barlow was a real winner. A lot of conjecture about where his position is and where he'll play and what happened last year. He was back to his best, 27 touches, 11 contested, 4 clearances, 7 tackles. The numbers that made him one of the most reliable players in SuperCoach. So you can lock him into our forward lines without a doubt. Darcy Tucker, little defender, 117k, found plenty of the ball, 21 touches, covered the ground pretty well with 8 marks. Will he get opportunity under Ross Lyon? Ross may look to give some opportunities to young players, but there's quite a few out there that are putting their hands up. Tucker put his hand up quite highly on Friday, so that's some good signs early for him. As for Richmond, they had a very, very weak lineup. I think if memory serves you correct, no Deledio, no Cochin, no Martin. I don't think Rewald played. I don't think Rance played. So, it's as weak as they get. And the only real one that stood out for me was Reece Conker. I watched a bit of this game, and he had 17 touches at three-quarter time. I think he either faded out or had a bit less game time in the last quarter. Finished with the 20 touches, half of them contested, but he looked quite good. His disposal at times was a little bit shaky, but I think he showed that he can find the ball, and his role was around that midfield. So I like that, and he's one to keep your eye on, no doubt. St Kilda and North Melbourne, not a great deal from this game. Seb Ross was arguably the best player on the ground. He found plenty of the ball with 26 touches. He's at an iffy price. I'm not sure if you go with him, but he has been a player that a lot of people sort of talk about as one of the next generation Saints, alongside of, say, your Billings and Stevens, and Akers is another one I like the look of. But Ross was definitely a very productive player, and I don't know if you'd look at him too closely, but he was very impressive. Ryan Clark, another young player you can find quite cheaply there. Started well, looked pretty good. He had the 13 touches, 8 of them contested, which is impressive for a young player. But as I say, this game was, didn't reach any great heights really. Both sides sort of going through the motions, I felt. just finding their feet. There are a few stars here and there, but in reality I think we'll see those two clubs really amp things up in the coming weeks. Sydney and Port Adelaide, a few players stood out for me in this game, none more so than Callum Mills. Didn't he set a light with 22 touches, and he just oozed all the class that has been talked about him. Plenty of articles written on him. We finally got to see what this bloke was about, and it was pretty impressive. My one doubt on him, or not doubt on him, but concern will be the opportunity. You're going to pay $211k for a bloke who's young, has talent to burn, and you got to say will be a gun player in the future. But alongside your Parkers, your Mitchells, your Kennedy, McVeigh, Hanbury, all these names, he might get squeezed out to a wing or a half-forward flank. You've also got the likes of a Heaney. I think I mentioned Tom Mitchell as well. He's found it difficult to just get enough time in that star-studded midfield of Sydney's. They may be earning to the side of youth at this point in time, but I do think while he was fantastic on the weekend, he will not always get that amount of opportunity. I know he was great, but for 211k, it's just something you got to be careful of. I think I could see him averaging around that 70 to 80, but maybe don't expect him to dominate games like he dominated this one for a certain amount of time. So he was impressive, but expect Parker to dominate, no doubt. 32 touches, he was back to some of his best form, and it was very impressive. Obviously had that injury late last year, which puts him at 538k, just sort of sub-premium sort of price range. He had, I think it was about a 40 or 50 late in the year when he got injured. He was on fire and then went down against the Pies, I think, and so it sort of brings his price down ever so slightly. I think it could be an interesting pick. It'll be a point of difference. I'm not sure whether he can go big, high ceiling like he once did, just given, he got a bit more attention last year. But the early signs are good. He was back to some of his best form, finding the footy, in and under, doing what he does best. So Lance Franklin was back as well. Didn't reach any great heights. It was just great to see Lance back out there. Played through the midfield a little bit. I think he only had the 6 touches, a bit rusty, basically just finding his feet. But Lance is a sort of player that you don't have to worry about too much about his NAB challenge form. It's a little bit exciting that he ran through the midfield. He might do that sort of rough head style, just the odd centre bounce with Sydney's luxury of talls at the moment. But I wouldn't expect him to be, if you're picking him thinking he's going to run through the midfield like a Pavlich once did at times, I wouldn't expect that. He's still their go-to man up forward, and expect him to be still kicking a bag of goals at his very best. But great to see Franklin back, and he's high on my radar and has been locked in my side since day one, so very impressive there. Sam Gray backed up the hype. Last year was no fluke. Can play, this bloke. 21 touches, 5 tackles, 5 clearances. He was probably arguably Port Adelaide's best player, I think. So he found plenty of the ball, and I think he's priced around that 89 average, so you can get him a bit cheaper. And if you can believe that he can average 100 plus like he did late last year, well, he could be a bit of a steal of a price, and looks to be still playing well. I know there are a few players missing from Port Adelaide, but Gray did have the runs on the board late last year, showing that he can do it season proper. Adelaide versus West Coast. Well, I nearly got a game for the Eagles on the weekend. They basically left everyone at home, and no one really went over to Adelaide. So they didn't have too much to offer. I didn't even write anyone down for them because they really struggled. There were a lot of no-name players. Not no-names, but just not household names, I should say. And no one just really shone out. Like, they got hammered. They hardly found much of the ball. The stat discrepancy was amazing. So it was all about Adelaide, and it was all about one man, Eddie Betts, who scored 200-odd SuperCoach points. And I'm not going to think about picking him. Don't often say that. I've heard a few people talk about him. Not sure if it's a bit of banter or not, but he's a great goal kicker, great goal assist play. He's creative, but he is not a SuperCoach option. So don't be fooled into looking at that and seeing, he scored 200. Even if he does half of that, he'll be a great player. It's just not going to happen. Betts is not a SuperCoach option. Don't be fooled into that. Brodie Smith played in the back line. That was probably the real bummer of the whole weekend. I really thought he would get some midfield time. The most concerning thing is there are a few players out for Adelaide in that midfield, and he still didn't run through there, which at this point in time says to me that Pike is really looking to use him off that half-back flank, which he can be a weapon off there, but he can go missing, which has been the risk. So to be honest, he left my team as soon as I saw that. So he may find his way back in. Things can change. NAB challenge, they try things, so don't put a line through him, but tread with caution with Smith, because as far as I'm concerned, he must play midfield to be considered. Matt Crouch, not Brad, Matt, played very impressive. Brad didn't play, but his brother Matt had 13 touches in the first quarter, which is very impressive considering I think it was only a 22-minute quarter given the heat. He ended up with 24, played a pretty good game. A lot of people talking about Brad, of course, but for an extra 50 or 60k, you can find Matt there, and he may be the Smokey of the Adelaide midfield, who really does rise up when everyone's talking about Seedsman, Smith, Lyons. Maybe it'll be Crouch, so that'll be very interesting to watch and see. It'd be a gutsy man to pick him at that price, mind you. Brisbane and Gold Coast, I just touched on how much of a bummer Brodie Smith was. Well, I was quickly turned around in a more positive frame of mind. I wish I didn't really have to talk about this bloke because he's one of my favourites. I wrote an article a few years back when he got drafted on Fan Footy, pumping him up. He hasn't lived up to the hype yet. I talked about him in my Gold Coast preview. I probably undersold him in that preview as I listened back, but he was definitely on fire, and his name is Jesse Lonergan. 23 touches, not too bad. 16 contested and 10 clearances. Goodness me, he dominates the inside stuff. He's a monster of a contested player, and that's what I like about him. He can win his own ball. He's a big body midfielder. He's learned his craft off half back, and all the articles I'm reading is that he is set for the midfield role. I listened to Rodney Eade's press conference, and they did mention the fact that, you know, so many midfielders missing. Is there room for a player like Lonergan when your Ablets come back, Prestia, Swallow, O'Meara, all these sort of guys? Is there room for him? Well, Eade was pretty confident that, I think he mentioned all those guys' names and said with the interchange cap and things like that, you're going to need plenty of midfielders. You always do in the modern game. He said, you know, we'll have 7 or 8 quality rotations through there, and he alluded to that Lonergan is a likely one, and he did his favours all the chance of impressing him there. He's priced at, let me think, I think it's about $3.45 if my memory serves me correct, and you've got to consider him, you just do. Brodie Smith, if you're worried about him, you could go down to Lonergan. He is risky because, a bit the same with Callum Mills, those midfielders will come back, he might get pushed aside, but I think Lonergan's a little more advanced than Mills in his career, and I rate him so highly, as you can probably tell, so take a look at him, no doubt. Darcy McPherson, 102k mid, again, probably was a beneficiary of the lack of depth in the Gold Coast lineup, but if he can continue some good form, because I think he had 23, 24 touches or something like that, he could be a player that really impresses the coach and could get some game time if elevated. For Brisbane, not much was really happening for them, to be honest. Keep an eye on who's winning the race of your Keys, Matheson, Jansen, that sort of rookie price, because I do believe one of those players will be a great selection, and if we can see who debuts in round 1, if not multiple, and the opportunity they can get in what is now a deep batting Brisbane midfield, I think one of them certainly will be a really good cash cow. Still struggling to identify as to who that may be, but definitely keep an eye on them. So that's a bit of a wrap of the weekend's NAB challenge. Sorry it wasn't in on the Monday or Tuesday, which I would have liked it to be, but I've been flat chat with my other job, writing articles for the footy previews that we're starting to do at local level and things like that, so it got pushed back a little bit, obviously on the Wednesday, but I'll be doing the same next week, and hopefully I'll be looking to aim to do that on the Tuesday. So definitely give me your thoughts on who stood out for you in the NAB challenge, and any players that really rose in value in your eyes, or you really put a line through them. Let me know, and give the video a like, subscribe to the channel. I'm nearly hitting 150, which is really exciting and has really gone past my expectation already, which is fantastic. So give me your thoughts on everything SuperCoach. It's great to hear from you guys, and it's good to hear that you seem to value my advice when you ask me questions, so it's good to hear. Definitely subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back shortly.